So we need to talk about the final reason feudalism fell apart. So we know that feudalism declined because of the political changes in England, where we have laws being developed, we have kings losing power, we have the common people gaining more power through their laws and rights that they are given. And then we know that in the plague, the Black Death, commoners are again gaining power, right? Peasants and serfs are becoming valuable. They're able to actually take in a lot more responsibility than before, and they're able to demand things they weren't able to before as well. And so we know that both the plague and the political changes in England are leading us to where feudalism as a societal structure just aren't it just doesn't make sense anymore, right? It's not needed. And so the final reason that feudalism falls apart comes down to the Hundred Years' War. So the Hundred Years' War occurred between 1337 and 1453. It's not exactly 100 years, but they basically were like, it feels like it's been 100 years, so we're going to call it what it is. So England and France fight a series of wars against each other. England and France are the frenemies of history. Sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're enemies, and at the end of the day, they continue fighting over and over, pretty much about the same stuff. When we look at the Hundred Years' War, we're going to narrow in at the Battle of Crecy in 1346. Basically, what we see here is the prime example of England versus France, technology versus their technology, right? And by technology, I'm talking about knights. I'm not talking about iPhones. So the English had an army of very lightly armored knights, foot soldiers, and archers with longbows. The French had heavy armor, and so they actually had outdated technology. They had really heavy armor, and they couldn't really move unless they were on horseback. Now, their soldiers did have crossbows, which were good, right? Because if you have a crossbow, you can shoot through a knight's armor, but they only shoot short ranges, whereas the English have long bows. They shoot farther distances. And so what you see here is that the English come to this battle, and they're automatically given an advantage because their knights can move quickly. They're very light. They're fast on their feet. If they fall off their horse, they can get right back on. And then they're archers with longbows. They're keeping people farther away. You can't get that close to them because they can take you out from a pretty far distance. And so the French knights see that, okay, the heavy armor is slowing us down. We can't move unless we're on a horseback. If we're on our feet, we're done. And then, we have crossbows, which are great for, shooting knights who are close to us. But we have to get closer, right? They couldn't actually shoot anybody from the distance that the English could keep them at. And so basically what we see here is that the English win the battle quite easily. By the time we get to 1415, the French return with far better tactics and far better leadership. So basically, 1337, the war starts. By 1346, the French are still losing. But then 1415 comes, and the French have a second wind. They've still been fighting this whole time, but the French now have better tactics and leadership, and this is primarily due to a young woman named Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was a 17-year-old woman. She actually fought and led the French army for her short life, and she led them to victory in the Battle of New Orleans. She actually won. Now, Joan of Arc is a very interesting character in history. You're going to watch a video on her in just a second. I don't want to spoil the surprises too much, but you should understand that a woman leading the army during this time is a very special instance. It is very rare that women are even allowed to fight, let alone actually have opinions and lead the army. And yet here is this 17-year-old woman who comes up and is like, yeah, I got this. I know what I can do to defeat the English. I know where I can go. So let me go ahead and lead you to victory. And the French are like, go for it. We trust you. She actually gained respect from the French forces. Eventually, though, she was captured and killed by the English. And with her death came basically the death of the French victories. But that being said, we'll call this war a win for them. The French did eventually drive the English out of France, and therefore the war was won by the French. But guys, I want you to know something. The French really don't win wars throughout history. They're kind of like, I don't know, well, for lack of a better word, they win because it's, gone on for 100 some odd years. So it's, somebody has to lose eventually, but they don't win quickly if they are winning. So again, she was such a bright light in the 100 Years' War for the French. And even though they eventually drive the English out of France, it's kind of debatable on if it was like a, quick and easy win for them or not. So Unfortunately, I can't show you this video within my video because of YouTube's copyright laws, but it is linked on your hyperdoc. So go ahead and pause me and please watch their video to find the answers to the 3 questions I have put on the side. 1, why did the French king and his army trust Joan to lead them? 2, what was Joan charged with by the English? And 3, how did Joan die? Pause me and go do that now, please. And then come back over here. So, 100 Years' War, looking at the impacts of it. What happens after the 100 Years' War? Well, basically what we see is that power is going to shift from feudal lords to the monarchs and the common people. So basically what happens is, you guys, the entire purpose of a noble, the entire purpose of a knight was to provide an army to their king, right? If I'm a king, I give my nobles the freedom to do what they want so long as they fight for me. Well, all of a sudden, we realize as kings, hey, we can rely on our commoners to help us fight. My commoners, my peasants, my serfs, they're my army. I don't have to rely on a noble lord to give me an army because I can go right to my people and I can say, hey guys, we need to go fight the French. Are you in? And then they're gonna come and they're gonna fight for me. And so kings realize that they can actually they can cut out the middleman. And so the feudal lords lose a lot of power and the kings and the common people are the ones who are gonna soak up that power instead. Then we see on top of that how changes in military tactics make knights and castles far less useful. Longbows take down knights. Gunpowder blasts holes in castle walls. It doesn't make sense anymore for anybody who's a knight with armor or living in a castle to suddenly have all this power, because at the end of the day, that power no longer exists. So the nobles and the knights are really no longer needed. We don't need a privatized army. We have our entire country. We don't need a castle because guess what? We can blow it up. And so what we see here is that shift in power. Again, feudalism relied on the social structure being very strict and power being strict. And then all of a sudden, those rules don't apply anymore. Peasants themselves, you guys, really felt that, you know what, we don't need to be loyal to our feudal lords anymore. You might be the lord of the manor, but I don't need to listen to you. Instead, what happens is peasants feel loyal to their country. That says local. I apologize. It should say loyal. Instead, they felt loyal to their country. And so what we see is this idea of nationalism being created. Nationalism is the idea of you recognize yourself as being part of a nation. And that's relatively new, you guys. So if somebody asks me like, oh, what are you? I might say, oh, I'm American, right? That's my nationalism. Am I, the bloodline of the United States? No, of course not. My family came from all over the world. But what we're looking at is I identify as being part of my nation. And it's pride in your nation. And peasants at this point basically start seeing themselves, instead of like, oh, I belong to Lord Bolingbroke, instead they're going to say, oh, I'm English, I'm French, I'm German. And so we see countries and therefore kings gain power, right? Because at the end of the day, the king represents our country. And if I, as a peasant, identify myself as my country, I am showing myself loyal to my king. And that is the final nail in the coffin for feudalism. And feudalism is officially done because we no longer need that structure. And we see a new future where kings are able to rule their countries by talking directly to their people. And the lords and knights of the era are officially out of a job.